Yeah, get a t-shirt featuring the thumbnail of this episode, yo. The link is in the description, yo, so you can find it, yo. I mean, like right now, yo.
The United States of America. A place where people like to disagree with each other. The one thing we all agree on is that this can be one spooky place. And the spookiest region of all is probably the Midwest, which has monster tales stretching back through the European loggers of the 1800s and continuing further to the natives here before them. Pity our poor Midwestern emailer then. She had worked security guard jobs when she was young to get some cash and found herself drawn back to the work during a tough financial period a bit later in life. But this time, fate sent her to guard locations near the Menominee River, the living borderline between Michigan and Wisconsin. In her case, it might as well have been sending her into the Twilight Zone, as she related to us in her email, which she entitled, "Why I Quit Working as a Security Guard." Dear Scary Stories NYC, I've seen cryptids a couple times, all within a short period of each other, during a stressful time in my life. I was working security at a few different locations on the Menominee River. I can't even remember if the gigs were in Wisconsin or Michigan because that river marks one of the dividing points between the two states. There was a golf course by a cemetery, and there was a lonely shipyard. Those were the two places where creepy stuff happened to me. I was thinking at first that this all went down when I was really young in the 1980s, but then I slept on it and I remembered some details which meant that it had to have happened a lot more recently than I would like to admit. I had blocked out that I worked security for a few months or almost half a year during a dark period for me in the very early 2000s. I don't talk about it much because, thankfully I've forgotten a lot of that entire era. It was a painful time in terms of my personal life, which I won't get into, and it was also the longest and worst bad luck streak I've ever had, and that part I will get into. Why? Because part of that bad luck was that I saw a number of monsters in that short period. You can call them cryptids or any other fancy words that you want, and you could tell me that they aren't bad luck from now till your tongue falls out. All I know is that I only saw monsters during that one bad luck period of my life, and once I got myself a better job and better habits, I stopped seeing the nasty things. Maybe the monsters you've seen represent relic hominid species or whatever fancy meldrumisms you want to use, but what I saw, those were monsters. Bad luck monsters. And when they scared me so much I had to quit my job, then I started to finally have some good luck again. It was almost like an angel sent them to make my life scary and miserable. Once I got too frightened and unhappy being broke, I sort of had no choice left but to get better paying work. So in that way, sometimes the worst things that happen to us can turn out to be the best things in the end. Now I had worked security about 10 years prior, and I never had any odd things happen around me at all. All of this was in that one area, at that one time, a decade later. Now before I even get started, I don't want to hear anyone saying I'm disrespecting security guards by saying the job wasn't suited for me when I was in my 30s. I don't disrespect anyone who works for a living. I'm just saying that I'm a small woman, and I'm better fit for almost any other kind of employment than that. It's good honest work, but I clearly wasn't meant to be there. If you're meant to be someplace, then you don't see walking nightmares on your job. Portents of evil are never portents of good, okay? It seems simple to me. The first cryptid sighting I had was during the period of time when I was working overnights at a golf course over there. This one doesn't sound as scary when I tell it, but if you had seen the size of this creature, you would understand that I wasn't exactly jumping for joy when this happened. When you realize that you're looking at a Midwestern Dogman, and that it could probably outrace your Buick LeSabre. Seeing it at only 100 feet away feels like you're already shaking hands with it. That thing could probably jog over and bite my arm off before I could turn around to run, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I remember that golf course was near a cemetery, so I was always having the creeps over there at nighttime, even when nothing was happening. Which was every single night, except for this one. So I remember walking around the grounds on patrol, and it was a nice night. But when I reached the area I'd been told to go patrol around, I saw someone's dog out playing with a pretty big animal that I couldn't really make out at first, as it was behind a small grove of trees. When it came out around the other side, though, I saw that it was a bear-sized canine, and I ceased advancing toward it. Of course, I'm calling it a Dogman now, but when I first saw the creature down on all fours, my eyes read that as a bear, I won't lie. But a bear can eat you just the same as a Dogman, so I found a spot to watch and observe the action from a distance. There was a smaller dog yapping and dancing around it, and after my eyes got focused better on the scene, I could see that it was a medium-sized dog, a house pet, judging by the jingling its dog tags were making. I wanted to get that dog away from that bear, and I tried to think of a way how. I mean, I wanted to return him to his owner, and at the same time, I didn't want to get eaten by that bear. But then it dawned on me that the dog seemed to be playing with the bear, who stood up on his hind legs, revealing that there was no way that he was even a bear. He was another dog, just a much larger version, that's all. He wasn't just able to stand on his two hind legs. He could walk, run, dance, jump. Anything a man could do standing up, that dog could do as well. And he could do it with 10 times the energy and power, too. This wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a dog. This was the Michigan Dogman. My feeling in that moment was that I had a duty to rescue that dog, and at the same time, I wanted to sneak away from there and deny I'd ever seen anything. Too afraid to think, I remained hidden and just watched. The Dogman chased the dog, who squealed in fear and ran off, eventually being grabbed and jumped by the larger one. The two rolled on the ground, creating a dust cloud and a whole lot of horrible noise between the two of them. Then I saw them both rise from the smoke around them, fur flying in the air, and I watched as the little dog then chased the huge Dogman right past where I was hiding, nearly running me down. As they passed, the ground underneath me bounced. It's scary to think how large that Dogman must have been. I watched them run off toward the edge of the golf course in the direction of the cemetery, and I decided that was good enough to go back and report that the problem was solved. I think I told them that it was two stray dogs fighting, and that I bravely made a lot of noise and scared those two wild beasts off. Actually, I stayed quieter than a mouse, and I'm just lucky that they left. But seriously, the little dog was chasing the Dogman the last I saw them. They were playing. And even though it was uncomfortable to be so close to that scene, that little dog was not in any danger. He'd be as well provided for by the Dogman as he was by any human family, I'd guess. I don't think I'm only saying that to relieve my guilt about not returning that pooch to his human family, but I am mostly saying that to relieve my guilt. Now let's get to the creepy Dogman shipyard story. That was the incident that made me give up and go find something less scary to do for a living. So I was walking a routine patrol of the shipyard on the Menominee that I was working that night, and I kept thinking that I heard something just up in front of me. I would walk in that direction and then hear another tiny noise further ahead of me in the darkness, and then I would head toward the echo of that. I kept wandering further and further, never quite seeing whoever it was in front of me. but I felt certain that there was someone there, just out of my view, in the shadows. And then I saw it. Or I saw what had been making the little noises ahead of me. It wasn't a man. It wasn't any kind of living creature at all. It was a pebble. How could a pebble be making all those tiny noises just ahead of me, leading me on a wild goose chase? Well, one pebble couldn't do that, obviously. But if someone had, say, a handful of pebbles, and if one were following behind me, and tossing the pebbles up over my head, and off in the direction that they wanted me to walk in, well, then I could get confused and fall right into their trap, couldn't I? And if that's what was going on, then that meant there had to be someone behind me, throwing those pebbles in front of me. When I finally succeeded in adding 2 plus 2 in my head, my heart leaped out of my chest, and I turned around suddenly to see a big, nasty-looking, drooling, salivating wolf that towered over me. I should say a wolfman, as he was standing up, like Lon Chaney Jr., but he wasn't in black and white, and he wasn't on a movie screen. I could smell his body funk, and now that we were looking at each other, I could hear him growling, softly. He was big. He looked more animal than human, but he stood up on 2 legs. The teeth on this thing looked like something out of a caveman movie. It looked like it was built to chase down dinosaurs and then eat them. It seemed far too strong to even exist. He was so far above an ordinary apex predator that he needed some other kind of designation. Just 4 or 5 creatures like this should be able to entirely take over the country from one coast to another, and it wouldn't even be a fair fight. That's why I'm saying he couldn't exist. He would be the most famous animal in the woods, instead of a story that most people think is a myth. A creature like this would not be able to hide from science, not in our own woodlands here in the USA. And yet I was seeing a North American upright walking canid, even though it made no sense to me at all. And then the creature leaped in the air, landed on me, and ate me alive. No, he didn't. I was just checking to see if you're still with me. What actually happened was that I knew an entrance back into the building near there, and so I dropped my gaze to the ground in front of me, and I started moonwalking backward. I kept the big monster in my peripheral vision, as I kept my head down, averting my eyes from eye contact. He seemed confused and just stood there where he was, making this ongoing growling sound, sort of like a broken coffee percolator. I ran into the security room, and the guy there was half asleep. I asked him if the creature was on video, and he looked pretty embarrassed to admit that he hadn't seen any creature. We got the video out that I thought was most likely to have caught some of the action, and we rewound it until I could see myself on the video. When we played it back, we could see me walking, stopping, and then moonwalking. At no point did we see the reason why I was doing all that. I looked at all the tapes, and in none of them could I see the creature that was there that night. Now I was the red-faced one, unable to explain what I was talking about, and wondering if I had lost my mind. In either case, I resigned pretty soon after that, and nobody tried to stop me. I think they all thought I had bats in the belfry, and with no Dogman on the security video, I had no argument that they were wrong. Everybody looked at me with frightened eyes until I quit, and then they looked at me with pity. There was no graceful way to exit. I left with my head hung low, a failure at a low-paying job, when I had been an executive less than a year earlier. But as I indicated before, quitting that job somehow created a cascade of good luck, and I was able to get my life back on track. I had to swallow my pride at first, and accept a charity position from a former rival, who had clearly won the rivalry. I've worked for her ever since, and it's mostly been a tough corporate life. You will find a lot of backstabbers in the working world, as I'm sure most of you have already discovered. But one thing you will never find, walking down the hallway of a corporate office building, is a North American upright walking canid, or a dogman. Legend tripping. It's the other American pastime. Hopping in a car too late at night, heading to a dark place with generations of scary stories associated with it. Or even just setting out in the car with family or friends, planning to drive for days, taking in spooky haunted roads, and going to the actual locations where people say they saw a Bigfoot or a real UFO. It's hard to think of anything more fun to do than that, as long as you can sleep late in the morning. One of the most famous monster locations in Wisconsin is of course Bray Road, where members of the Bray family made multiple sightings in the late 20th century of a dog-headed hairy werewolf man kneeling by the side of the road, eating roadkill. This was where the modern legend of the Dogman was born, and so people make pilgrimages there all the time. The thing is, that's farmland over there, so if Dogman still visits the place, he would probably only do it in the dead of night. You'd be more likely to run into one of those creatures in the woods a bit north of there, which is probably exactly where the Bray Road animals wandered south from in the late part of the last century. But you don't have to take my word for it. Instead, listen to the words of this Midwesterner in the following email he sent to me, which is entitled, Dogman, on the way home from Bray Road. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm not about to claim that I actually saw a Dogman on Bray Road, but I am going to tell you that my friends and I saw one on the way home from legend tripping down to Bray Road. This was the summer vacation between my junior and senior years in high school. My mom had left me with my dad in Madison for the summer, and my dad had lent me a car and given me free rein of his house, with the agreement that I wouldn't tell my mother that he was going on vacation with his new girlfriend. It was a good deal for me and for him, and since my mom was super angry at my dad during that period, she never asked to speak with him when she called, and she never noticed I had been left on my own by him. He let me invite some of my best friends over. He left me enough food to last until my Social Security kicked in, and he left me a big drawer of cash. My dad is a cash freak. He hates credit, and he only uses debit or credit for online purchases, basically. I dropped most of the cash in my bank because I don't trust my friends around a big drawer filled with 10s and 20s. I'm not saying they aren't honest, but I mean, nobody's that honest. Anyway, you get the point. It was between 3 and 6 of us young guys just starting to learn how to be men, and whoever had gotten free from their homes to stay over with me had a blast for however long they got to stay. So one night 3 of my buds were over and we were watching horror movies. We watched 2 werewolf movies in a row, and it got us to talking about real werewolves. I mean, we were in Wisconsin after all. Why watch a movie about a werewolf if you're in Wisconsin and you have the keys to one of your dad's cars? Why not go legend tripping for a real werewolf? This seemed like a genius idea to us, and it was just a little before 12 when we jumped in my dad's car to begin the 90-minute drive down to Elkhorn and the magical spot where the modern Dogman myth was born. We were never really sure what spot the sightings actually took place on, but it was pretty exciting to be there anyway, driving on the same road that Scott Bray and the other legendary witnesses once experienced their historic sightings on. We were talking about how the witness reported seeing the Dogman kneeling along the edge of the road, eating roadkill it was holding in its hands. I got chills imagining I was seeing that happening in front of my eyes. You know, there's very little in the manner of tree cover over there on Bray Road. It's all flatland, yet somehow that Dogman was right there. How had it gotten there without trees to hide it as it traveled? I guess it must only have traveled at night. I'm thinking that most people in the area are too busy and responsible to be up past midnight when the werewolves come out to scavenge and hunt. So on the way back, we were driving on Route 59 over where Lake Koshkonong and the Rock River turn into each other. In that area, there are at least 2 campgrounds that I can think of off the top of my head, and it can look a little spooky over there at night. So we're driving along, and then suddenly everyone starts screaming. I saw it too, and I slowed the car down to look. I could swear we were seeing a dogman eating something right off the side of the road. It was holding something in its hands and chowing down, you know? At first, it was ignoring us, but then one of my geniusest of genius friends rolled his window down and stuck his head out to get a better look. He started cursing up a storm like an idiot, and that dogman turned and gave him a look that shut my friend right up. Then the creature stood up from his squatting position really fast, and my friend banged the back of his head as he pulled it back into the car so fast. That creature had to be 9 feet tall or taller. It was no man in a costume, that's for certain. I hit the gas, and it took us home. I had enough dogman for one lifetime. One of my buddies says it was a bear with mange, but it sure stood up like it had a lot of strength. Plus, I could have sworn it was covered in brown fur. I was driving, and I couldn't look as long as the others because I had other stuff to deal with, but it sure looked like brown fur to me. The face and hands or claws were colored more darkly, and I think that was because there was less fur there. In my opinion, the skin was a dark bluish gray, at least in my bright headlights. And so the fact that most of it was a dull orangey brown indicated to me that this creature was still covered in fur and could not therefore have had mange. At least, not an advanced case of it. I don't think this was a bear at all. I think this was a unique form of canine. I mean, if it wasn't canine, then it must have been some kind of animal that imitates canines, because that sure looked like a mix between a dog and a wolf in terms of its features. And so, that's my Bray Road Dogman sighting that happened on the way back from Bray Road. Our executive producer is Super Spark here. In a month, they'll be a member for a year. Please join us in thanking Super Spark, who has been a channel member for almost 1 full year. Without kind people like Super Spark, we wouldn't still be making new shows. And if you'd like to hear about the perks that Super Spark receives, then I should like to forward you to our international TV super mongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.